What if the greatest tragedy in your life isn't failure, but actually achieving success at the wrong thing? Imagine climbing the ladder of success for 30 years, career, money, recognition, only to reach the top and realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. The Bible tells us that the wealthiest and wisest man who ever lived actually experienced that exact moment. King Solomon had everything the world promises will make you happy. He had power, pleasure, riches, knowledge, and after experiencing it all, he wrote these shocking words. Ecclesiastes 2:11 says, "Then I considered all that my hands had made, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind." Wow. In other words, all was empty. Nothing. Why? Because success without purpose that's aligned to the king will always leave you empty. And today we're going to talk about something many believers never discover: your kingdom calling. Most people today are wandering through life. They chase achievement, they chase relationships, entertainment, money, recognition, but they never stop to ask one simple question: why was I created? What am I here for? Without that answer, life becomes like a ship without a compass. You drift, you chase things that promise fulfillment, but never deliver it. And scripture actually warns about this. Proverbs 29:18 says, "Where there is no vision, the people cast off restraint." When people don't have God's vision for their lives, they lose direction. They start inventing their own purpose. And that always leads to idols, to money, status, success. Even ministry can become an idol. But none of these things can replace the calling God placed on your life. When people don't understand their calling, they usually fall into one of two traps. Trap one, the pursuit of success. They spend their lives chasing achievement. Jesus told a story about a wealthy man who built bigger barns to store his wealth, but God ended up calling him a flat out fool. Why? Because he had invested everything into temporary things while neglecting his own soul. Luke 12:20 says, "This night your soul is required of you." He succeeded financially, but failed eternally. Trap two, the pursuit of distraction. Others avoid purpose entirely. They fill their lives with entertainment, relationships, social media, endless distractions. Whenever someone wants to go somewhere, do something, try something new, they're game. But distraction is just another form of spiritual blindness. You stay busy enough not to ask the deeper questions, or don't stay long enough to hear the answers. But eventually, every person reaches a moment where they must face it. Why am I here? The Bible reveals something powerful. God never creates people randomly. Every person in Scripture was called for a purpose, just as every person in the world today has a purpose, including you. And every calling came with gifts to fulfill it. Let me show you a few examples, starting with Moses. Moses was called to deliver Israel from Egypt. Exodus 3:10, "Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people out of Egypt." But Moses didn't feel qualified. He said, "I can't speak." So God gave him Aaron and empowered him with miracles. What's the lesson? God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. So stop waiting to feel that you're certified or qualified, because he's calling you nonetheless. David was called to become a king. But before the throne, he was a shepherd. He learned courage through lions and bears and fighting them. Those battles prepared him to face Goliath. What looked like an ordinary season was actually training for his calling. Paul began as a persecutor of Christians, but Jesus radically changed his life. Acts 9:15, he says, "He is a chosen instrument of mine." The same passion Paul once used to persecute believers, God redirected to preach the gospel. Your past doesn't disqualify you. God often uses it as preparation. So the question becomes, how does God reveal my calling? Throughout Scripture, we see a pattern. We see a few patterns, actually. God revealing through several stages. Pattern number one, God initiates the call. Calling always begins with God. Moses wasn't searching for leadership. He was tending sheep when God interrupted his life. The burning bush wasn't Moses' idea. It was God's invitation. But notice something interesting. God didn't speak until Moses turned aside to look. Go back and look at this in Exodus 3. In verse 4, it says, when Yahweh saw that he turned aside, God called him. Many people never discover their calling for one simple reason. They never slow down enough to listen. Their lives are too full of noise, too full of distractions, ambition, schedule. God is speaking, but they're not paying any attention. Pattern number 2, your gifts reveal clues. Often your gifts are early indicators of your calling. David's worship and courage, Joseph's ability to interpret dreams, Daniel's wisdom. Your abilities are not accidents. Scripture even says, Proverbs 18:16, a man's gift makes room for him. Your gifts are signposts pointing toward your calling. Pattern number 3, preparation through trials. Before stepping into their calling, almost every biblical leader went through some kind of season of testing. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness. David spent years running away from King Saul. Joseph was in prison for years before becoming ruler of Egypt. These seasons weren't delays, they were preparation. God cares more about your character being developed than your timeline. Pattern number 4 to look for in understanding your calling: faithfulness in small things. God rarely reveals big assignments to people who are lazy with small ones. Peter, for example, was fishing when he called him. Elisha was plowing a field when he was called. David was watching sheep. God calls people who are already faithful where they are, with the small tasks that they've been assigned to. Yeshua said in Luke 16:10, he who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. Don't confuse your job, however, with your calling. This is where many believers get stuck, especially us men. Your job provides income, but your calling advances the kingdom. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. Moses was a shepherd. David was a shepherd. Peter was a fisherman. Matthew was a tax collector. Yet God called each of them into something bigger. Your job may be your platform, but your calling is your mission. Here's the final challenge. Let me ask you a few honest questions. Have you slowed down enough to hear God's voice? Are you developing the gifts He placed inside of you? Are you being faithful in the small assignments that are around you right now, in your home, in your workplace, in the things that He's put in your mind and your heart? Have you been faithful to those things? Are you keeping the promises you make to yourself because you know God is pushing you? Or are you chasing temporary success while ignoring eternal purpose? Because one day, brothers, we will stand before the King, and He will not ask how much money did you make or how many followers did you have. He will ask one question: were you faithful with the assignment that I gave you? Matthew 25:21, He says, well done, good and faithful servant. That's the commendation every kingdom citizen should desire. Now, if this message has stirred you and something in you, there's a reason. You weren't created to wander through life. You were created to live as a citizen of God's kingdom with a mission. And in my full discipleship course, we walk step by step through understanding the kingdom, discovering your calling and gifts, breaking free from modern idols, learning how to pray and hear God's voice, and becoming the kind of disciple who makes other disciples. This video is just the beginning. If you want to go deeper, I've created a full discipleship journey designed to help you actually walk in your kingdom assignment. You can find a link in the description in my bio. Join the course and start discovering the calling God placed in your life, because the King is calling. The only question left now is, will you answer?